I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't even blink. But I could hear everything, and what I heard made me wish I was already dead. My son's voice drifted through the hospital room like poison gas. Make sure she never wakes up, Caleb said, his tone as casual as ordering coffee. I don't care what it takes. Just keep her sedated until nature takes its course. The director's response was muffled, professional. I caught fragments, protocols, and family wishes and comfort care only. Words that sounded merciful, but meant murder. My heart screamed, but my chest barely moved. The machines around me beeped their steady rhythm, betraying nothing of the horror flooding through my paralyzed body. This was my baby, the boy I'd rocked through nightmares, the child I'd worked double shifts to feed, the son I'd loved more than my own breath. And he was standing 3 feet away, calmly arranging my death. Memories slammed into me. Caleb at 7, gap-toothed and grinning, throwing his arms around my neck. You're the best mama in the whole world, he'd whispered into my hair. I'd believed our bond was unbreakable. I'd been so stupidly, completely wrong. The present dragged me back. Footsteps. The director leaving. Then just Caleb's breathing, close now. I felt his shadow fall across my face. Sorry, Mom, he said softly. But the trust fund won't release until you're gone, and Vivian's getting impatient. You understand?
No.
No, I didn't understand. I didn't understand how 28 years of sacrifice could evaporate like morning dew. How bedtime stories and birthday cakes and college tuition could mean less than money he hadn't even earned. If this moment made your heart stop too, know that this isn't just my story. It's a warning. Sometimes the people we die for are the ones sharpening the knife. Stay with me because what happened next changed everything. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. My heart monitor suddenly shrieked. The steady beep exploded into chaos, erratic spikes that brought nurses running. I heard Caleb stumble backward, curse under his breath. What's happening? His voice cracked with what might have been fear. Or maybe just annoyance that his plan was getting complicated. A nurse rushed past him. Sir, you need to step out.
Now.
Hands on my wrist. Someone checking my vitals. Orders shouted in medical code I couldn't decode. The room filled with urgent energy. People trying to save me while my own son stood in the hallway, probably checking his watch. The irony cut deeper than any scalpel. My body, broken and unresponsive, was fighting for life. But my heart, my stupid, stubborn mother's heart, was breaking for the boy who wanted me dead. Through the chaos, one thought burned clear. I'd given Caleb everything. My youth, my dreams, my chance at a different life. I'd poured all of myself into him, believing that love this pure would echo back. Instead, it had curdled into something I didn't recognize. Something that wore my son's face but spoke with a stranger's cruelty. The machines stabilized. The crisis passed. But as the medical team filtered out and quiet returned, I lay there in my prison of flesh, knowing the real crisis was just beginning. Because I'd heard the truth. I knew what Caleb wanted. And somewhere in the darkness behind my closed eyelids, something shifted. Something that felt less like a mother's grief and more like a survivor's rage. My eyes fluttered, just once, barely perceptible. Then darkness swallowed me whole, dragging me down into depths where sons don't murder mothers and love doesn't rot into greed. But even as I sank, one thought followed me into the black. If I somehow survived this, Caleb would learn that a mother's love has claws. And when betrayed, it knows exactly where to strike. The morphine dreams took me back to when love was still clean. Before money. Before Vivian. Before my son learned that mothers are disposable. I was 23 again, standing in that cramped courthouse in my borrowed white dress. Harlan's hands were rough and warm, scarred from construction work. His vows were simple, no poetry, no grand promises. Just, I'll work hard for us, Marlene. I swear it. And God, he did. Every morning before sunrise, lunch pail in hand, kiss on my forehead. We had nothing. Our apartment was a shoebox with peeling wallpaper and a radiator that clanged like church bells. But we had each other, and somehow that felt like enough. When Caleb came, tiny and red-faced and screaming, Harlan cried. Actually cried. We made that, he kept saying, touching our son's impossibly small fingers. We made something perfect. Those early years blur together now. Sleepless nights, strained budgets, laughter over burned dinners. Caleb's first steps. His first word, which was dada, and made Harlan strut around for a week. Birthday cakes baked in our rattling oven, candles from the dollar store. I remember one night, Caleb, maybe 5 years old, climbing into bed between us during a thunderstorm. His little body trembling, his voice small in the darkness. Mama, don't ever leave me. I'd pulled him close, breathing in his shampooed hair. Never, baby. Never, ever. Have you ever looked back and wished you could freeze a perfect moment? Comment yes if family memories still warm your heart, because I'd give anything to live in that memory forever instead of here, trapped in this hospital bed, listening to that same child plot my murder. Harlan would have known what to do. He always knew. When Caleb got bullied in 3rd grade, Harlan taught him to stand tall. When money got so tight we ate pasta for 2 weeks straight, Harlan made it an adventure. Italian month, he called it, putting on a fake accent that made Caleb giggle. We were happy. Stupidly, impossibly happy with our thrift store furniture and our barely running car. Caleb would draw pictures of our family, 3 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. He'd tape them to the refrigerator, proud as a peacock. That's us, he'd announce. The best family in the world. I believed him. We all did. Sunday mornings meant pancakes. Harlan would flip them too high, making Caleb shriek with laughter when they stuck to the ceiling. I'd pretend to be angry, but I was memorizing it all. The sticky syrup on small fingers, the way morning light caught the gold in my husband's eyes, the pure and uncomplicated joy of being together. Those were the days when Caleb would burrow into my lap during movies, still young enough to need me. When he'd hold my hand crossing streets without embarrassment. When I love you, Mama came easy and often, unprompted by guilt or obligation. I didn't know I was living in the good part. Nobody ever does. We think happiness will stretch on forever, that the people we love will stay the people we love, that children remain children, soft and sweet and yours. But kingdoms, even loving ones, fall quietly. Mine started crumbling the day Harlan's heart gave out, and I was too grief-blind to notice the foundations turning to dust beneath my feet. The phone call came at 2 a.m. Construction site. Massive heart attack. Gone before the ambulance arrived. Harlan was 41 years old. The funeral was standing room only. All his crew showed up, hard men with soft eyes, telling me what a good guy he was. Like I didn't know. Like I hadn't spent 18 years watching him be good. Caleb was 16. Old enough to understand death, young enough to be shattered by it. He didn't cry at the service. Just stood there, jaw clenched, staring at his father's casket like he could intimidate death itself into giving Harlan back. I tried to hold him. He pulled away. That night, I found him in the garage, surrounded by Harlan's tools. He was gripping a hammer, knuckles white, whole body shaking. Baby, I started. Don't. His voice was raw. Just don't. I sat anyway right there on the cold concrete, waiting. Eventually he cracked. He worked himself to death for us. Caleb's words came out strangled. Every day, breaking his back, and for what? So we could keep living in this dump? So we could keep being poor? We weren't poor, I said gently. We had everything that mattered. His laugh was bitter, nothing like the boy who'd giggled at ceiling pancakes. Yeah? Tell that to Dad's corpse. See if love paid his medical bills. See if happiness fixed his heart. The words hung between us like smoke. I wanted to argue, to explain that wealth isn't counted in bank accounts. But grief makes people cruel, and Caleb was drowning in it. If you've ever lost someone who held your world together, drop a heart for them. Because losing Harlan didn't just take my husband. It took the glue that kept my son's goodness intact. The insurance barely covered the funeral. I picked up extra shifts at the diner, came home smelling like grease and exhaustion. Caleb got quiet, distant. He'd hole up in his room, and I'd hear him on the phone, his voice taking on new tones, harder edges. He's grieving, I told myself. He'll come back to me. But people don't always come back. Sometimes grief rewires them, reshapes them into strangers wearing familiar faces. Caleb started obsessing over college rankings, scholarship amounts. He'd stay up until 3 studying, driven by something that looked like ambition but felt like rage. When he got into business school, full ride, I cried happy tears. Dad would be so proud, I said, hugging him. He barely hugged back. Dad died broke. I won't. The words should have alarmed me. Instead, I made excuses. He's processing. He's motivated. He's going to be okay. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment my son left me. Not physically, that came later. But spiritually, emotionally, he severed something that night in the garage. Some cord that connected him to the boy who'd needed me, who'd loved me, who'd drawn those stick-figure families with such pride. He started measuring everything in dollars. Started looking at our small house with embarrassment instead of nostalgia. Started checking his watch during my stories, like my words were wasting his valuable time. You don't understand, Mom, he'd say whenever I tried to reach him. The world's different now. You have to hustle. You have to win. Win what? I'd ask. He never had an answer. Or maybe he did, and it was just too ugly to say out loud. Senior year, he brought home his girlfriend, Vivian. Even her name sounded expensive. And when she walked through our door, looking around with barely concealed disgust, I felt the final shift. The last piece of my boy sliding away. I'm not dying poor like Dad. That's what Caleb said the night before he left for college. He didn't mean it as cruelty. He meant it as a vow. But standing there in our small kitchen, watching him pack his life into boxes, I felt the ground disappear beneath me. Because I realized that to Caleb, his father's greatest sin wasn't dying young. It was dying without money. And I, who'd loved that man through every broke and beautiful moment, became a reminder of everything Caleb wanted to escape. Vivian arrived in our lives like a cold front, beautiful, sharp, impossible to ignore. She was everything I wasn't. Polished nails where mine were ragged from work. Designer handbag where I carried a grocery store tote. Confidence that came from never having to choose between electricity and groceries. Mrs. Morrison, she said, extending one perfect hand. Caleb's told me so much about you. The smile didn't reach her eyes. We were at a restaurant, Caleb's idea, neutral territory. He'd already changed. His clothes fit better, his haircut cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Success looked good on him, but it also looked foreign, like he was wearing someone else's skin. Call me Marlene, I said, taking her hand. It was soft, and used to labor. Vivian's smile sharpened. Of course. How quaint. Caleb didn't even notice the barb. He was too busy watching her, his face lit up with something between love and worship. My stomach turned. Dinner was an endurance test. Vivian spoke in a language I didn't understand, hedge funds and portfolio diversification and property investments. She dropped brand names like breadcrumbs, waiting to see if I'd recognize them. I didn't. Each mention felt like a tiny test I was failing. Caleb says you still work at the diner, she said, cutting her salmon into precise squares. That must be so fulfilling. The words were kind. The tone was a scalpel. It pays the bills, I said simply. Barely, Caleb muttered, then looked away when I flinched. Have you ever watched someone you love change because of another person? Tell me in the comments, because I watched it happen in real time. My son becoming someone who was embarrassed by the hands that had fed him, the sacrifices that had raised him. Vivian had plans. Big plans. They involved Caleb's career trajectory, their future home, the right social circles. I was nowhere in those plans except as an inconvenient footnote. When you retire, she said sweetly, we'll make sure you're taken care of. Retire. I was 53. Retirement wasn't a sunset cruise. It was another decade of back pain and sore feet and hoping my car didn't die. I'm not ready to retire, I said. Of course not, Vivian agreed, but her eyes said, you will be. When we decide. The visits became less frequent after that. Caleb would call, rushed, distracted. Can't talk long, Mom. Big meeting. Or Vivian needs me. Or, the worst one. Can you maybe not tell people where I grew up? It's complicated. Complicated. That's what I'd become. A complication in my own son's narrative. They got married at a country club I'd never heard of. The invitation came late, almost like an afterthought. I wore my best dress, 10 years old, bought for a funeral. Everyone else sparkled. I felt like a smudge on an expensive painting. Isn't this wonderful? Vivian gushed, holding Caleb's arm. Everything I ever dreamed of. I wondered if those dreams included a mother-in-law who worked for tips. Probably not. Months passed. They bought a house. 3 stories, 5 bedrooms, a chandelier that cost more than my yearly salary. Caleb gave me a tour, his voice proud, pointing out imported marble and custom this and designer that. Where would I stay? I asked. When I visit? He paused too long. We're still setting up the guest room. But when I saw it months later, the guest room was Vivian's yoga studio. The poison was slow, deliberate. She never outright said, "Your mother is trash." She didn't have to. It was in every suggestion that I might be more comfortable in a smaller place. Every comment about aging parents being a burden. Every time she steered Caleb away when I called, whispering that he worked so hard and deserved peace. I watched my son slip away, one small cruelty at a time. He stopped remembering my birthday, forgot Mother's Day. When I mentioned it, gently he snapped. I'm busy building a life, Mom. Some of us have ambitions. As if I hadn't had ambitions. As if I hadn't given mine up, so he could have his. The day everything shifted, Vivian and Caleb showed up unannounced. I was excited. Maybe they were finally making time for me. Instead, they sat me down at my own kitchen table, expressions serious. We've been talking, Caleb started. And we think it's time to consider your options, Vivian finished, her smile surgical. Retirement communities are wonderful these days. You'd have people your own age. Activities. It's really the responsible choice. My blood went cold. You want to put me in a home? It's not putting, Caleb said quickly. It's helping you transition into. I'm 55 years old and perfectly capable. Mom. His voice went hard. Be realistic. You're getting older. That house is falling apart. What happens when you fall? When you can't work? I stared at him, searching for my son in this stranger's face. I raised you in this house. Exactly, Vivian said softly. You've done your part. Now, let us take care of you. But her eyes added the rest. Let us put you somewhere we don't have to see you. Somewhere you can't embarrass us. They left, promising to send brochures. After the door closed, I sat in the silence of my small kitchen, surrounded by memories they wanted me to abandon. The pencil marks on the doorframe measuring Caleb's height. The burn mark from when Harlan forgot the kettle. Proof that we'd been happy here, once. We'll move you into a retirement home soon. That's what Vivian whispered as they left, thinking I couldn't hear. But I heard. And I finally understood that to them, I wasn't a person. I was an obstacle. Something standing between them and whatever they wanted next. I just didn't know yet that what they wanted was already mine, my life, my assets, my death. And they were willing to arrange all 3. The fall happened on a Tuesday. That's the detail that sticks with me, not the pain, not the terror, but the stupid mundane fact that it was Tuesday. Trash day. I'd been dragging the bins to the curb when my ankle turned on the uneven concrete. 1 second I was upright. The next, the world tilted, and my head cracked against the pavement with a sound like a watermelon splitting. The sky above me was very blue. Absurdly blue. I remember thinking how strange it was that I could see, but couldn't feel my legs. Couldn't move anything. Just my eyes, tracking clouds while warm blood pooled under my head. Mrs. Chun from next door found me. I heard her screaming before everything went black. The ambulance was lights and sirens and gloved hands checking pupils. Spinal board. Neck brace. Someone kept asking my name, but my mouth wouldn't work. Inside my head, I was shouting, I'm Marlene Morrison, I'm 55, my son is Caleb, please call my son. Outside, I was silent as stone. The hospital became my prison. Machines breathed for me. Tubes invaded every private place. Nurses talked over me, around me, like I was furniture. Days blurred. Nights stretched forever. Severe brain trauma, someone said. Unlikely to regain consciousness. But I was conscious. Trapped, screaming inside my own skull, but conscious. I could hear everything. Feel nothing. The worst kind of hell. Caleb came eventually. I felt hope surge. My boy was here. He'd make them try harder. He'd advocate for me. Then he spoke to the doctor, and that hope turned to ice. What are her chances? Caleb asked. His voice was flat. Clinical. Minimal, I'm afraid. Even if she woke up, the quality of life. I understand. So, if we're talking about comfort measures, that's code for giving up. For letting me die. Would you have the strength to forgive a betrayal like this? Tap subscribe to find out what happens next, because what I heard in that hospital room shattered everything I thought I knew about love and family. They moved me to a different floor. Quieter. Dimmer. Where people go to die with dignity. I wanted to scream that I was still here. Still fighting. But my body was a coffin, and I was buried alive inside it. Then came the day that changed everything. The day I heard Caleb's voice again, closer this time, speaking to someone in authority. I need to understand the timeline, he was saying. When will? I mean, how long does this usually take? The hospital director's response was muffled, but I caught the meaning. Weeks, maybe. Possibly less if they adjusted medications. And the estate? Caleb asked. I know it's horrible to think about, but legally, upon death, assuming you have power of attorney. Ido. Vivian and I were the only family. Everything's in order. My heart monitor kept its steady beep. Inside, I was dying in a different way. This wasn't about grief. This was about money. About inheritance. About how fast they could cash in on my corpse. That's when I heard Caleb say it. The words that killed whatever part of me still loved him. Make sure she never wakes up. The director hesitated. Mr. Morrison, I'm not sure. You said yourself recovery is impossible. I'm just asking you to keep her comfortable. Heavily sedated. So she doesn't suffer. He made it sound merciful. Noble even. But I heard the truth underneath. He needed me gone. Not eventually now. And he was willing to pay for it, push for it, arrange it. My own son was standing 3 feet away, calmly negotiating my murder. Memories slammed through me. Caleb at 7, fever sick, crying for me in the night. I'd held him for hours, singing off-key lullabies until he finally slept. I'd walked him to school every day until 5th grade. I'd sewn his Halloween costumes by hand. I'd believed that love like that built something permanent. But here we were. My love had built nothing but his escape route. Sorry, Mom, Caleb said after the director left. His voice was soft. Almost kind. But the trust fund won't release until you're gone, and Vivian's getting impatient. You understand? No. I didn't understand. I understood nothing about how we'd gotten here, how pancake breakfast became death sentences, how I love you, Mama became make sure she never wakes up. Then my heart monitor exploded into chaos. Not from the injury, from pure rage. My body, broken as it was, responding to the betrayal with the only protest it could manage. Alarms shrieked. Nurses flooded in. Caleb stumbled back, cursing. They stabilized me, but something had shifted. Some animal part of my brain that refused to surrender. I was trapped, yes. Helpless, yes. But not dead. And somewhere in the darkness, a thought crystallized with perfect clarity. If I survived this, Caleb would learn what I'd learned too late. Love can be weaponized. Motherhood can be armor. And a woman pushed to her grave will crawl back out of it with teeth bared. My body was paralyzed, but my mind burned with one singular purpose: survive long enough to make him understand what he'd done. Survive long enough to make him pay. The machines beeped their rhythm, and I lay there in my prison of flesh, conscious and calculating, waiting for any chance, any opening, any angel foolish enough to believe that justice still mattered in a world where sons murdered mothers for money. Angels don't always wear white. Sometimes they wear purple scrubs and smell like antiseptic and coffee. Nurse Evelyn appeared on my 4th week in hell. I heard her before I saw her, or rather, I heard her arguing with another nurse outside my room. Nobody's been moving her? For 4 days. Evelyn's voice cut sharp. She'll get pressure sores. Bed sores can kill people. The family requested minimal intervention. The family doesn't get to request neglect. Get me the rotation schedule. Now. Something shifted in my chest. Hope, maybe. Or just the recognition that somewhere in this building, someone still saw me as human. Evelyn came in, and I felt gentle hands on my shoulder, checking, assessing. "Oh, honey," she murmured. "They've been letting you lie here like forgotten laundry." She started coming 3 times per shift, repositioning me, talking to me like I could hear, because I could. She'd tell me about her day, her kids, her late husband who'd also been in construction. Worked himself half to death, she said one night, adjusting my pillows. Men like that don't know when to stop. They think providing means destroying themselves. My heart monitor jumped. She noticed. "You can hear me, can't you?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Marlene, if you can hear me, spike your heart rate again." I tried. God, I tried. Focusing every scrap of will on that machine, on making my broken body respond. The monitor climbed, just slightly but enough. Evelyn's breath caught. "Sweet Jesus. You're in there." Sometimes angels wear scrubs, not wings. Share this if you believe kindness still exists, because Evelyn became my lifeline to the world, the only person who saw past the body to the trapped soul still fighting inside. She started testing me. "Blink if you can. Just once." My eyelid twitched. Barely. But it moved. Evelyn squeezed my hand. "We're going to get you out of this. I don't know how yet, but we will." The next night, she came in during a late shift. The hospital was quiet, just machines humming their lonely songs. "I need to tell you something," Evelyn said, pulling a chair close. "Your husband, Harlan Morrison. I knew him." My heart monitor spiked hard. "Not well," she continued quickly. "But my late husband worked with him. Harlan was good people. The kind who'd give you his lunch if you forgot yours. The kind who talked about his family like they were his whole world. Tears I couldn't cry burned behind my useless eyes. He talked about you all the time. Marlene this, Marlene that. And his boy, he was so proud of Caleb. So proud." She paused. "Which is why what I overheard the other night made me sick." She'd heard Caleb's conversation with the director. "I wanted to report it," Evelyn said, her voice trembling with anger. "But it's murky legally. He's your power of attorney. He can make medical decisions. And he's being careful, nothing overtly criminal, just nudging things along." The machine beside me beeped faster, matching my rage. "But here's what he doesn't know." Evelyn leaned in close. "You're getting stronger. I've seen it. Little improvements. You're fighting, Marlene. And if you keep fighting, we might have a chance." She explained her plan in whispers. "Document everything. Build a case. But most importantly, keep Caleb thinking I was fading, not recovering. Let him get comfortable. Let him believe victory was close." "Can you do that?" she asked. "Can you play dead while you get stronger?" I would have smiled if I could. Instead, I made my heart monitor settle, slow, mimic a body giving up. "That's my girl," Evelyn said. "Harlan would be so proud of you." Over the next weeks, Evelyn smuggled in specialists who owed her favors. A physical therapist who worked my atrophied muscles in secret. A neurologist who ran tests off the books. Slowly, impossibly, I started reclaiming tiny pieces of myself. First, my right pinky finger. Then my left I could open halfway. Small victories that felt like miracles. But during Caleb's visits, I went corpse still. Let him see what he wanted to see. His mother circling the drain, taking too long to die, but getting there eventually. How much longer? He'd ask the nurses, his impatience barely masked. Hard to say. Could be days, could be months. I'd hear him curse under his breath. Hear Vivian on speakerphone, her voice sharp. The trust lawyer says we need a death certificate. This is getting ridiculous. Ridiculous. My refusal to die on their schedule was an inconvenience. One night, Evelyn came in with a phone. I'm breaking about 40 rules right now, she said. But you need to make a call. She'd found my old attorney, Louis Brennan. He'd drawn up my living trust years ago, back when Harlan was alive, and we actually believed in planning for futures. Evelyn held the phone to my ear. It took 3 tries, but I managed a sound. A croak. A vowel that might have been hello. Mrs. Morrison? Louis's voice was gentle. Is that you? Another sound. This one closer to yes. Evelyn filled me in. I'm so sorry this is happening, but I need to know. Do you want to change your trust?
Yes. God, yes.
I'm going to ask yes or no questions. 1 sound for yes, 2 for no. Understand. 1 sound. Do you want Caleb to inherit? 2 sounds. Emphatic. Do you want to revoke his power of attorney? 1 sound. Do you have somewhere safe to go if we get you out? Silence. I hadn't thought that far. Evelyn's voice cut in. She can come to me. I've got room. Evelyn, you could lose your license. Let them try. I've got 20 years of spotless record. What I won't have is blood on my hands. Louis sighed.
All right.
Here's what we'll do. They planned it while I listened, my broken body humming with something that felt like power. They were going to save me. Not just my life, my agency. My right to decide who got what, who deserved forgiveness, who earned nothing but the truth. The call ended. Evelyn squeezed my hand. You still with me? 1 squeeze back. Let's make sure Justice wakes up before he does. That's what Evelyn whispered, and in that moment I understood that survival isn't just about breathing. It's about outlasting the people who bet against you. It's about becoming the plot twist in your own story. The machines hummed their rhythm, and I lay there, pretending to fade while actually blooming back to life, 1 stolen moment at a time. Caleb thought he was watching me die. He had no idea he was watching me sharpen my claws. Memory has a funny way of showing up when you need it most. Lying in that hospital bed, my mind drifted back to a conversation I'd had with Louis Brennan 5 years earlier. You're young yet, Louis had said, shuffling papers in his cramped office. But it's smart to have things in order, especially with assets. Assets. I'd laughed at the word. Our house was paid off, sure, but it wasn't worth much. There was Harlan's life insurance, $20,000 that I'd tucked away untouched. And the savings account I'd been building, dollar by dollar, decade by decade. If something happens to you, who gets what? Louis asked. Caleb, obviously. He's my son. Louis had paused, choosing his words carefully. Mrs. Morrison, I always recommend including contingencies. People change. Circumstances change. Caleb won't change. I'd said so certain. So stupid. But Louis had insisted, and I'd agreed to a clause I never thought I'd use. If the primary beneficiary demonstrates elder abuse, neglect, or attempts to hasten the death of the trustor, all assets revert to designated charities. I'd signed it thinking it was ridiculous. Paranoid. Now it was my nuclear option. Evelyn smuggled the phone in again 3 nights later. Louis answered on the first ring. I've drawn up new documents, he said. Revoking Caleb's power of attorney. Designating Evelyn as your temporary medical proxy. And triggering that abuse clause we talked about. 1 sound for me.
Yes. Do it.
I need you to understand something, Louis continued. Once we file this, Caleb gets nothing. The house, the savings, the insurance, it all goes to charity. Domestic violence shelters. Organizations that help abused elderly. Is that what you want? Ever kept a secret that protected your peace? Hit like if you know silence can be power, because what I wanted was simple, not revenge exactly, but justice. I wanted Caleb to know that greed has consequences. That mothers aren't disposable piggy banks. 1 sound.
Clear.
Final. All right then, Louis said. Consider it done. The legal paperwork happened in shadows. Louis filed everything electronically, backdating where he could, using the photos Evelyn had taken of my pressure sores and neglect as evidence, building a case that would hold up if anyone questioned it later. But here's the beautiful part. Caleb wouldn't know until after. After I was supposedly dead. After he showed up, hand out, ready to collect. "We need to stage your death," Evelyn said one night, her voice tight with nerves. "It's the only way to keep you safe while you recover." The plan was insane. Transfer me to a different facility under a different name. Falsify a death certificate. Lewis knew a doctor who owed him. Let Caleb and Vivian think they'd won. "Can you handle that?" Evelyn asked. "Watching your own funeral from the shadows?" 2 weeks later, I'd regained enough function to whisper. Just barely, but enough. "Let them bury a ghost," I rasped. Evelyn's eyes filled. "Harlan raised a fighter, didn't he?" The transfer happened on a Monday. Ambulance in the middle of the night, paperwork that said I'd coded at 3 a.m. Evelyn rode with me to the long-term care facility 2 hours away, where I'd be Margaret Langley, widow, no children, insurance covering private care. Before we left, she placed one item in my hand. My wedding ring. I'd worn it for 32 years before the hospital removed it. "For when you need to remember who you are," she said. The ring was loose on my thin finger, but I'd never felt anything so solid. At the new facility, specialists worked with me daily.
Speech therapy.
Physical therapy. Slowly, agonizingly, I clawed my way back. My voice returned, raspy but real. My legs remembered how to hold weight. My hands could grip, could write. 3 months after my supposed death, I could walk with a cane. 6 months and I almost looked like myself again. Thinner, older, with white hair. I'd stopped dying. But alive. Furiously, impossibly alive. Evelyn visited weekly, bringing news from the outside world. "Your obituary was sparse," she reported. 3 lines. No service details. My jaw clenched. Caleb hadn't even bothered with a proper goodbye. "But here's the interesting part," Evelyn continued. "He filed for the estate transfer immediately. Like, next day. Lewis said he's never seen someone move that fast, because Caleb wasn't grieving. He was collecting. I imagined him in my house, boxing up my life, tossing photos, selling furniture, calculating value. The pencil marks measuring his height, painted over. The kitchen where Harlan made ceiling pancakes, gutted for resale. "When?" I asked Evelyn. "When do we tell him?" "Lewis says wait. Let him get comfortable. Let him spend some of what he thinks is his. Makes it hurt more when it gets ripped away." So I waited, healing in secret, planning in silence, becoming Margaret Langley by day and sharpening Marlene Morrison's claws by night. Lewis called with updates. He's bought a new car. Tesla. Took Vivian to Aruba. They're living large on money that isn't theirs.
Good.
Let them taste it. Let them build their castle on sand. Then came the call I'd been waiting for. "The estate's about to close," Lewis said. "Final paperwork next week." That's when we dropped the bomb. I hung up and looked at myself in the mirror. Margaret Langley stared back, gray-haired, thin, unfamiliar. But underneath, Marlene Morrison burned. Let them think I'm gone. Let them bury a ghost. That's what I'd told Evelyn months ago, and now the ghost was ready to rise. Not for revenge, I kept telling myself that, but for something more important. Truth. The simple, devastating truth that love can't be buried alongside inconvenient mothers. That greed has receipts. That sons who arrange their mothers' deaths don't get happy endings, even if they think they do. The paperwork was ready. The evidence was filed. Justice was no longer sleeping, it was putting on its shoes, and it wore my face. They held my funeral on a Wednesday. I know because Evelyn sent me the obituary screenshot. Marlene Grace Morrison, 55, passed peacefully after a brief illness. Survived by her loving son, Caleb, and daughter-in-law, Vivian. Private memorial service. In lieu of flowers, donations to the American Heart Association. Loving son. The words made me laugh, a harsh, unfamiliar sound that startled even me. There were no photos attached.
No stories about my life.
Just clinical facts, bloodless and brief. Caleb had reduced 55 years to 3 sentences. Evelyn pulled up the memorial page on her laptop. 27 people had signed the guest book. Most were old co-workers from the diner, people Caleb had never met. Their messages were kind, warm, full of memories he'd never bothered to collect. She always remembered how I took my coffee. Best coworker I ever had. Salt of the earth. My kids loved when Miss Marlene worked Saturdays. She'd sneak them extra whipped cream. Caleb had written nothing. Not even a perfunctory "Mom was great." Just his name on the funeral home paperwork as next of kin, organizer, sole mourner. The service was held at a budget chapel. Evelyn went, disguised in a hat and sunglasses, recording everything on her phone. She showed me the video later. I watched myself being eulogized by a priest who'd never met me, reading from generic notes about loving mothers and eternal rest. The room held maybe 15 people. Caleb sat front row, Vivian beside him in a black dress that probably cost more than my casket. He didn't cry. Not once. Just checked his watch twice and whispered to Vivian, who nodded and squeezed his hand. The whole service lasted 18 minutes. Imagine watching your own funeral. What would people say? Comment your guess below, because I'll tell you what they said at mine. Nothing. Nobody spoke. Nobody shared memories. It was a checkbox funeral. Obligation without love. Ritual without meaning. After everyone left, the camera caught Caleb and Vivian in the parking lot. Finally, Vivian said, loud enough for Evelyn's phone to catch. God, I thought she'd never die.
Caleb laughed.
Actually laughed. The lawyer said the trust transfers within 2 weeks. Then we can flip that dump of a house. And the savings? $230,000. More than I thought she'd squirreled away. $230,000. Money I'd saved from decades of tips and overtime. Nest egg I'd built for emergencies, for security, for the future I'd never get to see. Money Caleb was already spending in his head. We should celebrate, Vivian said. Somewhere expensive. Already booked us at the Graysonford night. Champagne, steaks, the works. They drove off in their new Tesla, the one they bought with my life insurance payout, leaving my fake corpse to be cremated on the cheap. No burial plot. No headstone. Just ashes they'd probably toss without ceremony. I watched that video 3 times. Each viewing carved away another piece of the mother I'd been, replacing her with something harder. Something that understood that grief is a luxury and justice is a necessity. Evelyn squeezed my shoulder. You okay? Better than okay, I said.
My voice was steady now, stronger.
When does Louis file? Tomorrow. Estate closing is scheduled for 9 a.m. That's when Caleb signs the final transfer papers. And when does he find out? Louis will be waiting for him. With police, if needed. I nodded. Tomorrow, Caleb would walk into that office expecting a windfall. Instead, he'd get the truth. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the boy he'd been, gap-toothed, eager, full of love. How had that child become the man who celebrated his mother's death over champagne? Maybe it was gradual. Maybe losing Harlan cracked something in him that never healed right. Maybe Vivian found those cracks and filled them with poison. Or maybe the rot was always there, just waiting for the right circumstances to bloom. It doesn't matter now. What matters is that tomorrow, consequences arrive. I wrote a letter.
Short.
Simple. Louis would deliver it after the legal bomb dropped. Caleb, you buried your mother for money, but it was your soul you lost. I loved you more than my own life, but you taught me that love without boundaries is permission for cruelty. I'm not dead. You're just dead to me, Mom. Evelyn read it and cried. You sure about this? I'm sure. Because here's what I'd learned in those months of silence. Forgiveness isn't always holy. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the natural consequences of their choices. Caleb needed to know that mothers aren't infinite resources to be exploited. That the safety net eventually breaks. That the woman you tried to bury might dig herself out and reclaim everything you thought was yours. The next morning, my phone rang at 9:15. Louis. It's done, he said. He knows. I exhaled. How'd he take it? About as well as you'd expect.
Rage.
Disbelief. Threats of lawsuits. I showed him the abuse documentation, the medical records, the photos. He went pale. And Vivian? She left. Just walked out mid-meeting. Guess the marriage wasn't built for poverty. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. Empty in the way old battlefields must feel after the armies leave. The charities will receive the funds next week, Lewis continued. Organizations supporting abused elderly, domestic violence survivors. Your mother's Heart Foundation got a chunk too. Harlan would be proud. Harlan. I touched my wedding ring, spinning it on my thin finger. Thank you, Lewis. For everything. Mrs. Morrison, Marlene, you did the brave thing. Not the easy thing. There's a difference. After we hung up, I sat in my small room at the facility, looking out at gardens I'd soon leave. Margaret Langley would disappear. Marlene Morrison would stay buried. But someone new would emerge, someone who understood that survival sometimes means walking away from the people you love most. You'll see me again, my son, but not as your victim. That's what I'd whispered in the hospital, delirious with pain and betrayal. But I'd been wrong. Caleb wouldn't see me again. Not the real me. That woman, the one who'd loved him unconditionally, died in that hospital bed. What survived was something sharper. Something that understood that closure doesn't always come with reconciliation. Sometimes it comes with release. With choosing yourself over the fantasy of who you wished your child had been. The next chapter of my life wouldn't include Caleb. Wouldn't include explanations or second chances or hope that he'd somehow become the son I'd raised. It would just include me finally putting myself first. 6 months after my supposed death, I walked into a hospital as a visitor, not a patient. Strong enough now, steady enough, ready enough. Margaret Langley had served her purpose. I'd let her fade, filed the legal paperwork to reclaim my real name. Not Morrison. That name carried too much weight. I took back my maiden name, Marlene Langley. Fresh start. Clean slate. But today I was just another face in the crowd, gray-haired and invisible, wearing glasses I didn't need and a hat pulled low. Just another elderly woman visiting a loved one. Nobody looked twice. I knew Caleb would be here. Lewis had called yesterday with the update. He's been trying to contest the trust, Lewis said. Filed 3 separate lawsuits. All dismissed. Turns out judges don't love sons who neglect their mothers to death. How's he managing financially? Not well. Vivian filed for divorce 2 months ago. Took half of what little they had left. The Tesla got repossessed. He's back to driving that beat-up Civic from college. Part of me, the part that was still a mother, ached at that. The rest of me remembered his laugh in the parking lot. I thought she'd never die. He's here visiting his lawyer, Lewis continued. Some ambulance chaser promising to overturn the ruling. They're meeting at the hospital cafeteria. Neutral ground. Justice doesn't always shout, it whispers. Stay till the end for the twist, because what I was about to witness wasn't revenge. It was simply truth making itself visible. I found a seat in the cafeteria with a clear view. Ordered coffee. I didn't drink. Waited. Caleb arrived at 2:30 and my breath caught. He looked terrible.
Thin.
Unshaven. Wearing a wrinkled shirt and the kind of exhaustion that comes from months of losing. The lawyer was worse. Cheap suit, desperate eyes, the kind who advertises on bus benches. They sat 3 tables away. Here's the situation, the lawyer was saying, too loud, unprofessional. The trust was ironclad. Your mother included abuse clauses you triggered by requesting the heavy sedation. I was trying to help her, Caleb insisted, but his voice was hollow. He didn't even believe himself. Doesn't matter. The hospital director testified that you explicitly asked him to make sure she never wakes up. That's pretty damning. Caleb's head dropped into his hands. I didn't mean it like that. Then how did you mean it? Silence. Because there was no good answer. No interpretation where arranging your mother's death sounds noble. The house sold, the lawyer asked. Yeah. $42,000 after repairs and realtor fees. All went to the charities per the trust terms. Savings.
Same.
Every penny. Life insurance? Vivian already spent most of that. Divorce court gave her half of what's left. The lawyer shuffled papers, clearly done with this case. Mr. Morrison, I'll be honest. You have no legal recourse. Your mother was competent when she established the trust, the abuse clause was legitimate, and you triggered it with documented behavior. You're lucky you're not facing criminal charges. Lucky. Caleb repeated, the word bitter in his mouth. After the lawyer left, Caleb just sat there.
Alone.
Staring at nothing. This was my moment. I could walk over. Reveal myself. Watch his face crumble with shock. But as I stood, something stopped me. Because what would that accomplish? He'd already lost everything that mattered to him. The money, the wife, the comfortable future he'd built on my corpse. Showing him I was alive wouldn't add to that lesson. It would just become about me again, about his reaction, about some dramatic confrontation that changed nothing. Sometimes the cruelest thing you can do to someone is let them live with their choices uninterrupted. So I walked past his table. Close enough that he could have reached out and touched me. Close enough to smell his coffee and see the tremor in his hands. He never looked up. I left the hospital and climbed into the used Honda I'd bought with money for my new job. Part-time bookkeeping for a nonprofit.
Small work.
Honest work. Enough. Drove to the coast, where I'd rented a tiny cottage. Nothing fancy, but it had a porch facing the ocean and a garden I was learning to tend. At night, I could hear waves instead of heart monitors. Before I left that hospital, I'd slipped an envelope to a nurse. Give this to the man in the gray shirt. Table 7. After he leaves. The nurse agreed, probably thinking it was a love note or birthday card. Inside was a photo, Caleb at 7, hugging me, both of us laughing. And a message in my handwriting. You buried your mother for money, but it was your soul you lost. I hope the price was worth it. Your mother is watching from somewhere you'll never find her. Not heaven, not the grave, just away. Always away from you. I didn't sign it.
Didn't need to.
He'd know. That night in my cottage, I made tea and sat on the porch watching the sun set orange and gold over the water. Somewhere, Caleb was opening that envelope. Reading those words. Maybe crying. Maybe raging. Maybe feeling nothing at all. It didn't matter anymore. I was free. Not from the pain that would always live in me, a scar tissue I'd carry. But free from the obligation to make him understand, to fix him, to mother him back into the boy he'd been. Some people can't be saved. Some betrayals can't be undone. Some sons remain lost no matter how long their mothers search. And sometimes, the bravest thing a mother can do is stop searching. Stop sacrificing. Stop believing that her love alone can heal what her love helped create. I sipped my tea and smiled at the waves, finally at peace with the one truth I'd fought against for so long. I deserved better than a son who celebrated my death. And accepting that didn't make me a bad mother. It made me a woman who finally understood that motherhood without boundaries is just another word for martyrdom, and I was done dying for people who'd already buried me. The cottage became my sanctuary. Small rooms that held only what I needed.
No ghosts.
No memories demanding attention. Just clean spaces where I could breathe without choking on the past. I painted the walls soft yellow, the color of sunrise, of beginning again. Planted tomatoes and herbs in the garden. Learned the names of my neighbors, who knew me as Marlene Langley, the quiet widow who'd moved here for peace. They didn't need to know about Caleb, about hospitals and betrayal and the death I'd staged. That story belonged to someone else now. Months passed, then a year. I worked at the nonprofit, processing donations, watching money flow to causes that mattered. Domestic violence shelters. Elder care advocacy. Every check I processed felt like tiny absolution, turning my pain into someone else's safety. Evelyn visited twice. We'd sit on my porch, drinking wine, watching the ocean swallow the sun. You ever regret it? She asked once. Letting him think you're dead? I considered that.
No.
Because Marlene Morrison is dead. The woman who'd sacrifice everything for a son who wanted her gone. She died in that hospital. I'm what's left. And what's that? Someone who finally chose herself. Evelyn raised her glass. To choosing ourselves. We drank to that. To survival. To the complicated grace of walking away. I heard about Caleb through Lewis, who'd call occasionally with updates I never requested but secretly needed. He's working retail, Lewis reported. Manager at an electronics store. Vivian married someone else, a banker. They're living in your old neighborhood. My old neighborhood, where Harlan and I had been happy in our small house with our simple life. Where Caleb had drawn stick figures on the fridge and believed our family was the best in the world. All of it gone.
Sold.
Painted over. Turned into someone else's memories. He tried to find you, Lewis said carefully. Hired a private investigator. But Margaret Langley doesn't exist anymore, and Marlene Langley has no connection to Marlene Morrison.
Good.
He'll never know you're alive, Marlene. You understand that? Never know you forgave him. I didn't forgive him, I interrupted. I released him. There's a difference. Because forgiveness implies reconciliation, a bridge rebuilt. What I'd done was cut the rope entirely. Let him stand on his side of the chasm, while I built a life on mine. If this ending touched your heart, share it so others remember. Greed blinds love, but truth always wakes. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. Drop your thoughts in the comments below and inspire others with your perspective on family, betrayal, and the courage it takes to choose yourself. One morning, almost 2 years after my supposed death, I received a package. No return address. Just my name and cottage address in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a letter.
Short. Messy.
Written on notebook paper like a child's homework. Mom, if you're somehow reading this, I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I know sorry doesn't fix what I did. But I need you to know that I think about you every day. I see your face when I close my eyes. I hear your voice when I'm alone. Vivian left because I couldn't stop talking about you. My therapist says I'm stuck in unresolved grief. I say I'm stuck in unresolved everything. The money's gone. The house is gone. Everything I thought mattered turned to dust. And the only thing I want back, the only thing that ever actually mattered, is the one thing I can never have.
I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry.
I love you. I always loved you. Even when I was too stupid and greedy to show it. Your son, Caleb. I read it 3 times. Each word a small knife, familiar and sharp. Then I did something I'd never imagined doing. I wrote back. Not to his address. I didn't have it, didn't want it. But to the universe. To the boy he'd been before grief and greed corrupted him. I wrote about the pancakes on the ceiling. About Harlan teaching him to swing a hammer. About the stick figure drawings that used to grace our refrigerator. About the boy who'd said, "Don't ever leave me, Mama," and meant it with his whole small heart. Then I wrote about the man he'd become. About make sure she never wakes up and parking lot celebrations and 18-minute funerals. About love turned weapon and mothers turned casualties. I wrote until my hand cramped and my tears made the ink run. Then I folded the letter, placed it in an envelope, and walked to the beach. The waves were high that day, angry and beautiful. I waded in until the water reached my knees, cold enough to make me gasp. Then I tore the letter into pieces, scattered them on the waves, watched the ocean swallow every word, carrying them away to depths where mothers and sons and broken bonds dissolve into nothing. I release you, I told the water.
Told Caleb.
Told myself. I release you from my heart. The waves crashed and I stood there, finally empty, finally free. Back at the cottage, I made tea and sat on my porch. The sunset painted the sky in shades of forgiveness, pink and orange and gold. Not forgiveness for Caleb. Forgiveness for myself. For believing so long that motherhood meant enduring anything. For thinking love without limits was virtuous instead of dangerous. My phone buzzed. Text from Evelyn. Dinner next week? My treat. I smiled and typed back. Absolutely. This was my life now. Small joys. Chosen family. Peace bought with the price of letting go. Somewhere, Caleb was working retail and living with regret. Somewhere, he was learning what I'd learned in that hospital bed, that consequences are patient teachers and grief is a faithful companion. But I wasn't his teacher anymore. Wasn't his mother, in any way that mattered. I was just Marlene, the woman who'd survived her son's attempt to bury her. The woman who'd clawed her way back from a grave built on greed and claimed a life worth living. The sun disappeared below the horizon. Stars emerged, pinpricks of light in the vast darkness. I sat in my yellow cottage by the sea, listening to waves and breathing in salt air, finally understanding that some stories don't end with reconciliation. They end with release, with waves carrying pain into depths too vast to measure, with mothers choosing themselves over sons who chose money, with justice blooming quiet and fierce in the space between what was and what will never be again. I finished my tea and went inside, closing the door on the past and opening windows to a future where I was enough, where I'd always been enough, where the only person I needed to save was myself. And in the silence of my small, perfect sanctuary, I heard what I'd been waiting 2 years to hear. Absolutely nothing.
No machine is beeping.
No footsteps approaching with malice. No voice saying words that could shatter worlds.
Just peace.
Hard-won and holy. The kind of peace that only comes when you finally stop waiting for the people who hurt you to heal you and start doing the healing yourself. This was my happy ending. Not perfect. Not what I dreamed as a young bride or new mother. But mine. Earned through survival. Built on truth. Sustained by the revolutionary act of choosing myself. The waves crashed outside my window. I smiled in the darkness. Justice had bloomed in silence, exactly as I'd known it would.